Hello, friends, and welcome to a Bible study from the Old Testament, from the book of Joshua, the story of the fall of Jericho, the first Canaanite city conquered by the Hebrews under the leadership of Joshua, and the story within it of Rahab the harlot. Joshua succeeded Moses in leading the Hebrews out of the wilderness into the land of promise, and in obedience to Jehovah, he conquered the first Canaanite city on God's list, Jericho. And the ethnic cleansing of Jericho and other Canaanite settlements was accomplished in order that a home base be established for the Hebrews turned Israelites, from whom the revelation of the God of creation would spiral out to all nations. And it was Rahab the harlot who helped in that effort by protecting the two Hebrew spies sent by Joshua to check out the city, the encounter of which changed her life forever. That said, let us look at some background to the account. Now in this frame we have a photo of the ruins of Bronze Age Jericho against the backdrop of modern Jericho, the name of which means City of Date Palms. Situated in today's West Bank of Israel, west of the Jordan River and 15 miles east of Jerusalem, Jericho is thought to be the oldest inhabited city in the world, the lowest place in the world at 800 feet below sea level, and most often fought over due to its location in the land bridge connecting Eurasia, Africa, and Mesopotamia. Not to mention that Jericho had many natural springs and lush vegetation, and during the Greco-Roman period, it was the winter residence of King Herod the Great and other wealthy Israelites, until it was destroyed in the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD in response to the Great Jewish Revolt. And before the fall of Jericho, the city looked something like this, a fortified city with 18-foot high and 6-foot thick impenetrable mud brick walls. Archaeologists have found that Jericho's walls collapsed suddenly in a single violent event, and according to the burnt shards uncovered in the excavations, archaeologists conclude that what had survived the collapse of the city had been burned. So we can conclude at this point that the biblical record of the destruction of the fortified city of Jericho is factual. And according to the Reese Chronological Bible, the date of the fall was April 22nd, 1422 before Christ. Now, the characters in the story of Rahab are Joshua, the son of Nun, and two of his unnamed spies, and our heroine, Rahab, a Jerichoite prostitute and innkeeper. And let me say here that Joshua is not the only place Rahab the harlot is mentioned in the Bible, for we find her included in the list of the faithful in Hebrews 11, where it is said, "By faith the harlot Rahab did not perish with those who did not believe, when she had received the spies with peace." And concerning the necessity of doing good works, James wrote, and I quote, "Likewise was not Rahab the harlot also justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out another way?" James 2:25. And most importantly, Rahab is first mentioned in Matthew chapter 1 in the genealogy of Jesus of Nazareth, verses 5 and 6, said to be the wife of Salmon, the mother of Boaz, the great-great-grandmother of King David. Unfortunately, we know little about Rahab other than how she made a living. But what we can say is that she was an idol worshiper of the Canaanite deities, the Baals, El, Asherah, and Astarte. And if we were to get a glimpse of her home, we would find teraphim, household figurines that represent the Canaanite gods and goddesses that the Canaanites believed would bring prosperity and protection to the home. Even with the descendants of Abraham, we find that teraphim were venerated. If you will recall, Jacob's wife Rachel stole her father Laban's teraphim, perhaps believing that they would reveal to her father Jacob's plan to relocate, Genesis 31:19. Also, David's first wife Michal took a sizable teraphim and hid it under the covers of their bed in order to deceive her father Saul into thinking that David was sick, while he escaped from the king's attempt to have him killed. 1 Samuel 19:13. Now the setting of the story is taken from chapters 3 through 5 of Joshua, an incredible lead up to the account of the conquest of Jericho. And so I'll give a short review before we go on to read chapters 2 and 6. For instance, in chapter 3, it begins with the account of the Hebrews crossing over the Jordan River into Canaan. And this was no ordinary crossing, for miraculously the waters were cut off, allowing for over 600,000 men, not including the number of women and children, to easily cross to the west side of the river. And it is written in chapter 4 that Joshua ordered 12 men, one from each tribe of Israel, to take stones to construct a memorial to this miraculous event that marked the end of their 40 years in the wilderness and their arrival at the land promised to them by Jehovah. This miracle was not just for their sake, but for the Canaanites to know that the God of Israel was mighty above all others. And following the crossing, the children of Israel camped on the east side of Jericho, where Jehovah instructed Joshua that all the men be circumcised, since those born in the wilderness had not been. And the Lord said to them, and I quote, "This day I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you. Therefore the name of the place is called Gilgal to this day," Gilgal meaning rolling. And the last notable event before the conquest of Jericho was the celebration of Passover by the Israelites, which occurred on April 14th. And it was after the feast that they began to eat the grain of the land, wheat and barley, after 40 years of eating the manna that Jehovah provided for them in the wilderness. Now let's begin to read from the book of Joshua, chapter 2, beginning in verse 1. Then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim. "Go look over the land," he said, "especially Jericho." So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. And it was told the king of Jericho, saying, "Behold, men have come here tonight from the children of Israel to search out the country." So the king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, "Bring out the men who have come to you, who have entered your house, for they have come to search out all the country." Then the woman took the 2 men and hid them. So she said, "Yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. And it happened as the gate was being shut, when it was dark, that the men went out. Where the men went, I do not know. Pursue them quickly, for you may overtake them." But she had brought them up to the roof and hidden them with the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order on the roof. Then the men pursued them by the road to the Jordan, to the fords. And as soon as those who pursued them had gone out, they shut the gate. Now before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof. And here she says something remarkable to the Hebrew spies. "I know that the Lord has given you the land, that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who are on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted. Neither did there remain any more courage in anyone because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and on earth beneath." Now, being a prostitute and an innkeeper, it's likely that Rahab heard about the Hebrews and their mighty God from her clients. Yet instead of being fearful, she is in awe of Jehovah, acknowledging that he is the true God over the heavens and the earth. This is remarkable, given that she would have been an idol worshiper, not to mention succumbing to the panic and mayhem of the people around her. This could only be the result of the Holy Spirit working in Rahab to draw her to Jehovah, and to be willing to worship the God of Israel, and to leave home and culture behind. And then she decided to bargain with the Hebrew spies for her life and the lives of her family. In verse 12 it says, "Now therefore I beg you, swear to me by the Lord, since I have shown you kindness, that you also will show kindness to my father's house, and give me a true token, and spare my father, my mother, my brothers, my sisters, and all that they have, and deliver our lives from death." So the men answered her, "Our lives for your lives, if none of you tell this business of ours. And it shall be, when the Lord has given us the land, that we will deal kindly and truly with you." And in verse 15 it says, "Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was on the city wall. She dwelt on the wall. And she said to them, 'Get to the mountain, lest the pursuers meet you. Hide there 3 days until the pursuers have returned. Afterward you may go your way.' So the men said to her, 'We will be blameless, that is, free from this oath of yours, which you have made us swear, unless when we come into the land you bind this line of scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down. And unless you bring your father, your mother, your brothers, and all of your father's household to your own home. So it shall be that whoever goes outside the doors of your house into the street, his blood shall be on his own head, and we will be guiltless. And whoever is with you in the house, his blood shall be on our head if a hand is laid on him." In other words, the spies took full responsibility for Rahab and her family if they would only be ready and waiting for them in her house. And about that scarlet cord, it has been typed as the shed blood of Christ that saves sinners, given its color as well as with the imagery of the red cord flowing down the side of the wall as Christ's blood flowing down the cross. Also, there is the element of the sign of the red cord identifying Rahab and her family in order to be saved from perishing, as the shed blood of Christ saves sinners. And like all repentant sinners, Rahab was one whose belief and good works rendered her forgiven, resulting in her salvation that fateful day. And in verse 20, it goes on to say, "And if you tell this business of ours, then we will be free from your oath which you made us swear." Then she said, "According to your words, so be it." And she sent them away, and they departed. And she bound the scarlet cord in the window. They departed and went to the mountain and stayed there 3 days until the pursuers returned. The pursuers sought them all along the way, but did not find them. So the two men returned, descended from the mountain, and crossed over. And they came to Joshua the son of Nun, and told him all that had befallen them. And they said to Joshua, "Truly the Lord has delivered all the land into our hands. For indeed all the inhabitants of the country are faint-hearted because of us." And jumping from chapter 2 to chapter 6, when the Israelites were in Gilgal just outside of Jericho, it says, beginning in verse 1, "Now Jericho was securely shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out and none came in. And the Lord said to Joshua, 'See, I have given Jericho into your hand, its king and the mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city, all you men of war. You shall go all around the city once. This you shall do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. But the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. It shall come to pass when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, that all the people shall shout with a great shout. Then the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up every man straight before him.' Then Joshua the son of man called the priests and said to them, 'Take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord.' And he said to the people, 'Proceed and march around the city, and let him who is armed advance before the ark of the Lord.' So it was, when Joshua had spoken to the people, that 7 priests, bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the Lord, advanced and blew the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. The armed men went before the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard came after the ark, while the priests continued blowing the trumpets. Now Joshua had commanded the people, saying, "You shall not shout or make any noise with your voice, nor shall a word proceed out of your mouth until the day I say, 'You shout,' then you shall shout." So he had the ark of the Lord circle the city, going around it once. Then they came into the camp and lodged in the camp. And Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. Then 7 priests bearing 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord went on continually and blew with the trumpets. And the armed men went before them. But the rear guard came after the ark of the Lord, while the priests continued blowing the trumpets. And the second day they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. So they did 6 days. But it came to pass on the 7th day that they rose early, about the dawning of the day, and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner. On that day only they marched around the city 7 times. And the 7th time it happened, when the priests blew the trumpets, that Joshua said to the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." And in verse 17 it says, "Now the city shall be doomed by the Lord to destruction, it and all who are in it. Only Rahab the harlot shall live, she and all who are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers that we sent. And you by all means abstain from the accursed things, lest you become accursed when you take of the accursed things, and make the camp of Israel a curse, and trouble it. But all the silver and gold and vessels of bronze and iron are consecrated to the Lord. They shall come into the treasury of the Lord." So the people shouted when the priests blew the trumpets. And it happened when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat. Then the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. And they utterly destroyed all that was in the city, both man and woman, young and old, ox and sheep and donkey, with the edge of the sword. But Joshua had said to the 2 men who had spied out the country, "Go into the harlot's house, and from there bring out the woman and all that she has, as you swore to her." And the young men who had been spies went in and brought out Rahab, her father, her mother, her brothers, and all that she had. So they brought out all her relatives and left them outside the camp of Israel. But they burned the city and all that was in it with fire. Only the silver and gold and the vessels of bronze and iron they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord. And Joshua spared Rahab the harlot, her father's household, and all that she had. So she dwells in Israel to this day, because she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. Then Joshua charged them at that time, saying, "Cursed be the man before the Lord who rises up and builds the city Jericho. He shall lay its foundation with his firstborn, and with his youngest he shall set up its gates." So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout all the country. So what can we say are the most essential things in the account of the fall of Jericho and the story of Rahab and the spies that we can apply to our own lives? Obviously, the salvation of Rahab and her family points to Christ and his plan of salvation that was fulfilled 16 centuries later in his death on the cross. And the conquering of Jericho points to our victory over death and destruction through Christ. It was Rahab's belief in Almighty God and her acting upon it that saved her. It is in our belief in Jesus Christ and our acting upon it by obeying his commandments that we are saved from the penalty of our sin. Further, Rahab found her destiny in being a worshiper of Jehovah, from whom King David descended, and more importantly, Jesus of Nazareth, the incarnated Son of God. And like Rahab, I pray that your destiny is found in Jesus Christ. Thank you for viewing this Bible study, and please subscribe to my channel where you'll find more Bible studies that will help you to know the true God, the creator of all that there is, and how very much he loves you.